Hello, thanks for being here. The following interview was recorded about 5-6 years ago by Terry Carter, and my friend David Holman was also present. He has since passed on. He was a lifelong friend. I made some corrections in this interview, and because things have changed so much over the years, the last 5-6 years, learned new things, new perspectives and such, new information. Terry and I have decided that when time permits, we're going to do another interview to bring you up to date on some of those things. Anyway, enjoy the video and thanks for being here. What we're going to talk about in this interview is a subject that some people are very interested in, others, quite frankly, couldn't care less. We're going to talk about Jesse James, and I intend to show you certain evidences that will, in my mind, at least leave you wondering whether in fact Jesse James was actually killed in 1882 by Bob Ford. I believe that we have uncovered enough evidences to show that this is not the truth, and that Jesse James did in fact live on under many aliases and continued operations with the Confederate underground clear up until his elderly years into the 1900s. I'm going to show some photographic evidence that, of course, is not conclusive, but you look at the photos and you decide for yourself.
All right, I've twisted Dan Lowe's arm to give me some great story, and he's agreed to give me a great story, and a lot of his research he's done a lot on Jesse James. And with that, Dan, take it away.
Well, the Jesse James thing got into my blood when a friend of mine sent me a book, and he asked me to look at it and critique it, and told me that I seemed to have an ability to think outside the box, and he wanted to know what I thought of the book. And the book is Jesse James is one of his names. It is not the book Jesse James was his name. The book was written by Del Schrader, I think it is, and where he got his information was from an individual who claims to be Jesse James's grandson, Lee Hawk, who later changed his name to Jesse James III. And it's all based on some happenings that took place in 1947, I believe it was, 46, when this guy by the name of J. Frank Dalton came forward and tried to tell the world that he was the actual Jesse James. The story that I've been able to dig up on it is that it was extremely downplayed in outside of the book itself. I think for the purpose of casting doubt on the whole thing, in reading through the book, I could see right up front that there were some pretty incredible claims in this book, and so I thought, but they were believable. And when I approach things such as this, I try to go at them without an agenda. I want to prove or disprove. If it's true, great, I want to prove it's true. If it's false, I want to prove it's false. So in going through the book, I realized there was going to be some pretty incredible claims in here, and so I decided to kind of do the research as I read the book. And long story short on that is what I found is that a majority of the claims made in this book are probably factual. See, it came down to two things for me. One, how could this guy, Dale Schrader, back in the 70s when he wrote the book, or Lee Hawk for that matter, who was feeding him the information based on what his grandfather, Jesse James, had told him, how could he come up with so much accurate information without the aid of the internet? It just, there isn't an encyclopedia out there called The Life History of Jesse James, and if there was, it's the opposite of the truth.
And you and I both know, because we both did it, that before the internet, it was tough to get information. You had to research, you had to get interlibrary loans. It was tough to get information. So
it was.
I agree with you 100%.
I could spend weeks at a university researching a topic and walk away in 2 weeks with maybe one piece of information.
Yep.
No, it was difficult back in those days, and
people don't know how good they've got it now with the internet.
You're one of the few that I know knows, because how long have I known you? Almost 30 years.
Yep.
Anyway, that was one of the main things that I started to notice in this, is how could this guy be so accurate on so many things without the internet? I mean, he would have had to have been damn lucky to just happen to come across all the information that would support the stories that were told in this book. But the biggest thing for me was, which it seems to me the whole book is based upon, was that Jesse James staged his own death. And I figured, you know what, if I could prove or disprove that, the credibility would extend throughout the book one way or the other. And I think I've done that.
Really?
And I'm going to show you some pictures. There's going to be a lot of inserts probably in this video. Hang on a sec, there was something else that I wanted to cover. One thing before we get too involved here, the people need to understand about Jesse James, and it would take an awful lot of documentation that I've gone over through the years in my studies, not only in the ancient history and the histories of the past, but I've done my fair share of law study as well. This whole story of the Civil War, it's almost backwards. Almost. You got people running around today ranting and raving about all of this Confederate statues and flags and things, and it offends them. And what they don't understand is that's not what the war was all about. They want us to believe that the war was about freeing the slaves. And quite frankly, it wasn't really a consideration. And I want to be brief on this because I don't want to go into it. The war between the states began pretty much when the 7 congressmen walked out of Congress. And the premises of it was they didn't like the contents of the 14th Amendment, or the 13th for that matter. It had already been established that the people who were enslaved shouldn't be, okay? I mean, come on, do you really think that these Southerners watched their plantations be burned to the ground, their relatives shot and killed, their women and children boarded up in churches and lit on fire so they could burn to death alive just because they wouldn't let their slave go? The Civil War was about slavery, but not the way we've been told. It was about creating slavery. It was about being subject to world bankers, world powers, creating slavery, a class of citizenship, a fiction that you would take responsibility for. The South saw this. They knew it. They saw what the bankers were trying to do it. Abraham Lincoln has verified what was going on. And the people try to brush it off as, oh, that never happened. Well, it did. The North had no idea what was happening, and they helped bring it in. The very same powers that we booted out of here in 1776. Final attempt in 1818, if I recall, 1812. I think it was 1812. Same people finally came in and took power. And call it conspiracy theory if you want, but I've seen the documents, I've read the history, I've read the law books pertaining to these things, and we're in bondage and captivity once again.
So how was Jesse involved in this Confederate war?
Okay, good question. Okay, this brings us back to Jesse. Jesse was really no different than our secret operatives in our wars today. Men who are exceptionally good at what they do, and they go behind the enemy lines and they bring back data. And Jesse James was really no different. That was his job. Jesse James's job was to keep an eye on the North so that he knew what they was doing. Jesse James's best friend through all of this, by the way, was a former slave. And this man stuck with him clear to the end. On Jesse's deathbed, he was even there to validate and verify that this is Jesse James. And he lived several years after that. In fact, they were doing studies on the guy back in the 60s because they couldn't figure out how this guy lived to be 121 years old, I think it was.
Really?
I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but it'll come out soon enough. But anyway, back to Jesse. It was his life, is to operate as a secret operative within the organization. Some people like to call it KGC. To me, that just, even though it's an accurate acronym for what they were, it just, I don't know, sounds a little too James Bondish for me, so I just call it Confederate Underground. But Jesse was up to his eyeballs in the Confederate Underground, and his mission was to affect the North, or world bankers, who were in the process of stripping this country of its freedoms and using the slavery thing as their reasons for doing all of this, and it really had nothing to do with it. The South lost. They failed. And these people, they think they're free, but they don't have constitutionally protected rights. They have civil rights. Jesse's job was to infiltrate and affect them and cripple them whenever he could. He didn't go in and rob storehouses and private individuals, stagecoaches, depending on what they were carrying. His job was to affect these people who were trying to change America. That's why he went after the railroads, went after banks.
So you're saying he was an outlaw, but he was outlaw too. He wasn't,
In short, he was a hero.
To the South.
And the people don't know it. He was a hero to the entire nation, but they don't know that.
Okay.
He tried to keep this a free country. He was trying to save the free republic. Lincoln was all concerned about the Union. Why? We hadn't had anybody come against us since 1812. Why was the Union so important? Well, you either play the game or you don't borrow the money. That's when the world bankers came in. But let's not go there anymore. I'm telling you this because you need to understand who Jesse James was.
Yeah, I
He
didn't
wasn't
know any of this.
a bloodthirsty murderer, okay? But could he kill on a drop of a hat? Oh yeah. And did so many times. He married several women throughout his years. Roundabout way, it was part of his job. One individual in all of this, and who is talked about in the book, and has gone down in history as the man who identified the body of Jesse James. Captain Harrison Trow, who under the orders of Governor Crittenden, which the academic world paints the picture that he didn't like Jesse and he basically put out a hit on him, is what they tell you.
Governor of what?
Governor of Missouri. But what they don't know is that Governor Crittenden was a friend of Jesse James, and this was all planned prior. Okay? There's enough evidence out there to support this and to back it. But nobody ever asked the question. The town, St. Joseph, where Jesse James was supposedly shot by Bob Ford, who was in fact Jesse's friend. I don't think anybody will argue that point. This whole thing was staged. But this man, Harrison Trow, shows up on the scene almost about the same time the police showed up from the next town. They figured it would have taken them about an hour to get there, to hear about it and make the return trip. Yet nobody understood, how did Harrison Trow get there? And he made the announcement that he was sent by Governor Crittenden to take charge of this situation. Well, how did Governor Crittenden, who lived something like 250 miles away, hear about it, then dispatch word to Harrison Trow, and Harrison Trow have no idea where he was, but he managed to get there within that hour.
Within the hour after he'd been shot.
Right. In the academic world, the majority of the stories will tell you that Harrison Trow is the one who definitively identified the body of Jesse James. Well, in the book, it tells the story that Jesse and his men staged this death, and they had killed Charlie Bigelow. And the majority of them didn't think it was going to work because Charlie didn't look anything like him. And they said, "This isn't going to work, Jesse." And he said, "Yeah, quit worrying about it." He says, "You'll see." Well, he knew because he had control of the situation. Not only the people involved, but in many ways the people that would show up, such as Harrison Trow. And they tell you in there, and if you do a little research on Harrison Trow, you can't find his beginnings. You won't find his parents. You won't find a birth certificate. And that's true in almost every alias that Jesse used. You can't find the parents. It's as if they just appeared on the scene and then disappeared. Some of them lingered on, like Harrison Trow. You can find land records for him down in Texas. He owned over 8,000 acres down there. But in the book, it tells the story about how Jesse killed Charlie Bigelow. They set it up. You can read about it. And he changed his appearance and resurfaced on the scene as Harrison Trow and took control of the situation, and it went down in history that Harrison Trow identified the body of Jesse James, when in fact he identified his own body.
So you're saying Harrison Trow was Jesse James?
Uh-huh.
Do you have a picture of Harrison?
I'm glad you asked. I thought, what if I could find some photographs of Harrison Trow? Well, I didn't just find one, I found three. I found one of him as a very young man, which I don't think ever was intended to be Harrison Trow. It just happened to be in his family photos, and everybody assumes that it's Harrison Trow. I'm telling you, it's Jesse James.
Really?
And then there was this little gal by the name of Anna Lee, who's quite talented, and you can find her and read all about her. She used to do charcoal drawings, and she'd take photographs and she'd do a charcoal drawing of it. And she was pretty good at it. There was another guy that did it too at the same time. He wasn't quite as good as she was, but she pretty much captured these photos. And I've got several examples I can show. One of the photos, to my surprise, had the name Harrison Trow. And I clicked on it and pulled it up, and I said, "Holy crap, that's Jesse James." And I'll show you those photos.
Cool.
And I found an older one of him. And I would swear I was looking at J. Frank Dalton.
Really?
Just a little younger, though.
So you think he maintained some of these aliases as
For
he
a long
moved in and
time.
out of different towns, states?
Depending on what he was doing and where he was operating, depended upon the name he was using.
Business operations, businesses.
There's a story, rumor, we'll call it, legend, up in the area of Idaho, that Jesse James was living in Malad, and that he had married a gal up there, a Mormon gal, and had joined the church at that time, even went and helped build one of the temples up in Canada. And the people up in Idaho are pretty adamant that this guy, they're pretty sure it was Jesse James. Well, he went by the name of William Cole, and the woman that he married was Susan Palmer. Susan Palmer had a daughter by the name of Anna, if I recall her, Anne. I don't know that Jesse, he wasn't with her for very long. And if you check the dates on how all of this happened and when it happened, it would appear that Jesse disappeared. He told her that he was off to find his fortune in California.
So when he married her, did he marry her and tell her he was Jesse James, or he
No.
kept the alias?
She didn't know he was Jesse James,
Okay.
I'm sure of it.
Okay.
But I think when he left, and it has to do with the reasons why he left, but when he left, I don't think he knew she was pregnant, because throughout this possible history that I've been able to grab from this book, Jesse always took care of his own. And if he knew a kid was his kid, he was going to take care of him one way or the other. And there's some interesting stories even attached with Calamity Jane, whom I would think that he had a regretted one-night fling with way back in the day. But there's a suspect child that came from it. Even Wild Bill Hickok suspected that this child wasn't his. And he wasn't the big hero everybody made him out to be. Where were we?
Idaho.
Left Idaho.
Back to Idaho. Well, Jesse up and told her that, I'm off to find our family fortune in California and go find some gold. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but when I started checking dates on various events, trying to chronologize a lot of this stuff, there's a pretty good story in the book about this 62 tons of gold shipment that he was dispatched and told that he needed to go and intercept it. It was being shipped from Granite, Colorado, up and over the mountain and into Denver. And that's where he went. The dates are perfect. I don't think Del Schrader could have hit the nail any closer. But for some reason he never went back, because she wasn't long, she had remarried and the child was born. I don't think Jesse ever knew the child came from that union. But the 62 tons of gold dust, that's a heck of a cool story. It didn't take long with today's technologies to find out where it likely is.
You're saying you've likely found where it's at, or somebody else?
Likely.
Okay, never mind. Okay,
Yeah, something like that.
okay.
Someday I might go look for it, just for the fun of it. Not for the gold. I mean, there's too many other places where we can get gold, but just some of this stuff I gotta prove one way or the other.
Right.
Let's just say everything's there that should be there, that was described in this story.
And this story is one that came out of this book you're talking
Yeah,
about. Okay.
there's a lot of very interesting stories in that book. One of the primary aliases that he used, and there's overwhelming evidence that it's factual, okay? In fact, I'd challenge anybody to disprove it. So I don't think they can do it. But was the alias of William A. Clark. who was known as one of the Copper Kings up in Montana. And he became a senator, if I recall, in Montana. He's the very same Clark in which Clark County received its name down in Arizona. I mean, this guy got around. He even admitted, according to the book, that it was almost his undoing. He says in the book that he had hired a couple of individuals to stand in for him, doubles. And I can show you some of the pictures whom I believe are the doubles, and I can show you the ones that are William A. Clark, and I'm telling you, it's Jesse James. All you got to do is do a little bit of comparison. It doesn't take a school book learned individual to look at photographs and to see that there's a high probability these are the same individual. There's no science behind it. Sure, they can go in and they can measure the eyes and they can do the distances and so forth, but just a slight tip of the head is going to change those things. William A. Clark got around, and the beautiful thing about it is it's well documented as to where he was and what he was involved with, and you'll see a lot of strange coincidences that just happen to pop up.
What kind of business ventures is his name attached to?
Mining, utilities, railroads. We found some interesting things down in St. George. Speculative, I admit, but highly probable. Mining interests in Utah. I mean, even in the book, he tells you there are Confederate cache sites all over the West. He didn't say central. He didn't say east. It's all over the West. There's two other individuals that wrote some books about the Civil War, Quantrill's Raiders. One of them was William Gregg, who for some time I thought might be Jesse James, but I think this is one of them bona fide coincidences where two people just happen to look an awful lot alike. It wouldn't surprise me if William Gregg, who it may have been an alias, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was an even older brother to Jesse James that we've never known about, because they do look very much alike. You put him next to Frank James, he looks like him as well. But I have nothing to go on.
Who's Frank James?
Frank James is Jesse James's older brother by about 4 years, I think 4 or 5 years, and is the most common individual whose photo will show up as Jesse James. And it's not Jesse, it's Frank. Jesse had sandy colored hair, bright blue eyes, usually had a little, goatee going on. Jesse was probably considered a handsome man, okay? He has a very identifiable face. Oh, one thing about Jesse that he just couldn't seem to hide, except maybe in one photo that I've seen, is he had this uncontrollable cowlick in his hair right here. And I'm sure it might have almost got him in trouble a time or two. But he just couldn't seem to make it go away. So when he changed the part in his hair from which would be his right side to his left, oh man, did his hair fight it. And you'll see that in Harrison Tro's photo. There was another individual that I wanted to mention. Another thing, while I'm trying to remember who this other individual was, or alias that you used, is you find numerous mistakes as far as who Jesse James's first wife was. The writers that you see appear on the internet, the academic world, they've all got Belle Starr as Jesse James's wife. And what they've done is they've taken two individuals, Myra Bell, who was Jesse's true love, and Belle Starr, and they've combined them into one person. And no, Jesse will even tell you, Belle Starr was a whore. That's not who he was married to. Another individual that they're just not paying attention. Even after reading this book, people still get it all messed up. His wife was not Zerelda. Okay, I think maybe this came from the people who don't believe that Jesse James was killed, because Charlie Bigelow's wife, who was Jesse's first cousin, her name was Zerelda. His aunt was named Zerelda, and she's gone down in history as his mother. His mother was Molly Dalton, and she doesn't look anything like Zerelda. Jesse was never married to his first cousin, ever. He was kind of like one of those cooties things, like, ew.
You want to mention the alias? He was up in Nebraska or Colorado, and then he, with that wife, and took her to Texas.
That would be Jim Reed.
And the story with that?
There are some stories that Myra Bell, not Bell Starr, that Myra Bell found out that Jesse was being unfaithful, and I believe this is all speculation because I can't find any record of it other than somebody who says, I said so, that she, after leaving Jesse James, that she married Jim Reed. And they moved to Texas. It's funny, they're always moving to Texas, you know, all these aliases. And I think they said that Jim Reed got into some kind of trouble, bank robbery or something like that. I don't know how that could happen. And that she eventually married some other guy. But we have a photo of Jim Reed and Myra Bell. And although it is a poor quality photo, and the face of the man is almost whited out, almost makes him look like an albino, but if you look closely, I'm pretty sure it's Jesse James.
Huh.
You know, photos were bound to come to the surface eventually, and I've heard that in a museum down in Hereford, Texas, I'd love to get down there, but I'm told there is a picture hanging on the wall of Harrison Trow and his wife, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be Jesse James and Myra Bell. I have nothing to prove it at this point, but
Right.
there was a strange individual who showed up in Copper Creek, Arizona. And he was supposedly a brother who was managing a mining operation with his brothers, and somewhat of an eccentric, and he built a mansion up the top of the mountains. He went by the name of Roy Sibley, and his wife's name was Bell. And she was the first postmaster of that little community up in the mountain, Copper Creek. But as I was looking at these, doing some research on ruins one day, I come across this one, and it said Sibley Ruins, and I, pulled it up, went to Google Earth, checked it out and everything, and I thought, that's one of Jesse's houses. 1909. Jesse built that. I could be wrong. I admit it's speculative, but
Yeah.
I think by the time I'm done with all this, I can tie Jesse into that house somehow. But now it's just some ruins, and I mean, it was a mansion.
Huh.
But I'm pretty sure that was Jesse and Myra. John Trammell was one of Jesse's most faithful and trusted friends through this whole thing. And John Trammell, if I remember right, lived to be up, I think it was about 121 years old. He was 111 when Jesse died. And he was there. He'd never broken contact with Jesse James. Maybe a short time in
So
their
he
older
traveled
years.
traveled with Jesse out here to the west. If you're saying he came
His
out
whole
here to the west,
life.
he was with Jesse.
How would John Trammell not know who he is? He knew exactly who he was, and he attested to it.
So this is the black guy that identified him when he supposedly killed himself or died.
He's one of approximately 100 people
I mean,
who
But
testified.
He's the one that when he, in 1953,
John Trammell was there as well.
identified him. Yeah.
John Trammell had disappeared by the time Harrison Troe came to identify the body. But John Trammell was part of the whole thing. He shot the other two brothers. He's the one that come up with the idea to carve information on bricks and hide them, bury them somewhere in St. Joe. And he used to giggle about it, you know, and wait till they find them St. Joe bricks. Well, some of those bricks were found by Lee Hawk. And it was quickly hush-hushed because, you know, we can't be changing history.
So have you researched, you know, all these different aliases? Do they have, you say there's no beginning to these aliases. Is there an ending to these aliases?
You know,
Death certificates to them, or?
some of them, like William A. Clark, you know, he openly killed himself off. I can't remember what the story is as to why he died. It had something to do with a sickness. And, but he does tell what he did after that, after he went to his own funeral, which he had done several times before. He actually went to his own funeral and was one of the guys that carried the casket of Charlie Bigelow. It is an interesting book. And I fully understand why people just have a hard time buying the story, because it is an incredible story. But you got to take the things that are said throughout the book one at a time. It's not that hard. And go see if you can find some evidence to support it, to see if that could have happened, likely happened, or did happen.
How many aliases do you figure that you know about?
Well, the book says somewhere around 70 aliases. That may or may not be true. To me, it seems excessive. But I think I could provide some very convincing evidence on at least a dozen.
Do you have any information on Jesse and or his cohorts in places other than the western states? Like in the South, in the Midwest, anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. Tennessee, Montana, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, all the western states.
Has any of the stories you've researched gone east of Utah or Colorado?
Oh, absolutely. Oklahoma, Tennessee, Kansas.
So those states there that you're talking about, those are the states that I've always assumed that's where Jesse ran, and that's where all the KGC treasure, Knights of the Golden Circle was, where all the robbery stashes, where everything happened. But you're saying it migrated and later on in his life it all went on here. Do you think he had KGC treasures hidden up here? I mean, you're saying that he had successful businesses, so there was no need to rob, or was he still robbing to, I mean, and tell about, man, I'm giving you all kinds of things to talk about. Tell about what the KGC was for, you know, the South will rise again. Just tell us.
Well, yeah, the KGC, or Confederate Underground, that was their motive, was to get back the Free Republic, because they had lost it. Everybody thinks this word federal is some great American name. Federal, if you really want to understand what it's all about, just supplant the word with foreign, and you've hit the nail on the head. Okay? Foreign Reserve Bank, Foreign Bureau of Investigation. Try it. We don't have a free republic anymore. We lost it in the Civil War. It's now a federal government.
But the South, they felt like they was going to start the war up
They
again,
wanted it
and
back.
that's the reason they was.
Do I think that the KGC is an active, viable entity today? I don't think so.
Well, I don't know if it's a viable entity today, but I do believe it was a viable entity back then.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I don't think many people know about that, so I want you to talk about
See,
that.
I've got a couple of things that I want to share with you. One in particular that I think you're going to raise an eyebrow at. It has to do with your mystery glyphs. See, I just happen to know the one individual that's been studying the mystery glyphs for almost 30 years.
And that is why I wanted you to do this.
I wonder who that is.
I wonder who that is. That's why I wanted you to do this on Jesse James, because you mentioned to me that you thought they might tie into the mystery glyphs, and,
Well-
and you got me curious.
Had somebody told me this 10 years ago, I would have thought they were a little out there, okay? So I know how it sounds. There's two things. And one of these things is what helped facilitate this research and made it explode over the last 3 or 4 months. And it has to do with some carvings in the rocks somewhere down in central Utah that a friend sent me some pictures of, and I looked at them and thought, holy bleep, this can't be in Utah. And I'll show you the pictures. I don't have a problem with anyone seeing the photos. Just won't tell them where it is.
Okay, fair enough.
It's in central Utah. I'll take you down there and show you firsthand.
Cool, thanks.
But that's because I know you. And I know that you're not the kind of individual that would take someone's livelihood from them. I have some photos that I'll show you, and this is an incident that took place in actually over the last 3 years. A friend of mine sent me some photos. Apparently, a friend of his had found some unusual carvings down in central Utah, and he wanted to know more about them. And after showing them to my friend said, I know somebody that I think might be able to shed some light on this. So he sent the photos to me. Well, as soon as I saw the photos, I knew exactly what they were. But I didn't know whether I wanted to tell my friend, because then he would go tell the people who found them, and I would never discover where they were. So I told him that I'm pretty sure I think I know what they are. But to be certain, and this is true, to be certain, I need to see them personally.
Mm-hmm.
It took him 2 years, and he finally got the location on them. I sent a friend down there to look for them, and he didn't find them on the first. Actually, no, that was me that went down there. We didn't find them. I had one of them sugar attacks and kind of put me down, and once I got a Snicker bar down me, I still didn't feel like going back out. Well, I had another friend go down there, and he found them. And he found another one, and he found another one, and another one. There's no question, it is absolutely a Confederate underground site, KGC, and there's no doubt Jesse James was personally at that location.
Really?
Well, the thing that was curious to me is, can we find evidence that Jesse was in the area? Oh, absolutely. In fact, Terry, every single mystery glyph site, I can put Jesse James in the area.
Really?
And this would have been anywhere from the late 1800s up into the 20s. And there's one person I know that would know this. And if I'm not mistaken, at every one of these sites, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, you'll find a railroad. You'll find a mining operation.
Yep, you're right. There are a couple exceptions, but not many. Yep, you're right.
But for those that are exceptions, I will show you another reason.
Cool.
Now, you've heard of the Navajo Code Talkers.
Yep.
Do you think that was a new concept?
Nope.
2 of Jesse James's most trusted operatives were Sioux Indians. And you know as well as I do, those mystery glyphs are Sioux Ojibwa glyphs.
Yep.
I don't know how
100%.
anybody can say they're not.
Yeah, 100%. They definitely tie to it. Yep.
Well, who would have been, would you agree that Jesse probably knew several different Indian languages?
But I haven't ever studied Jesse, so I
According to the
wouldn't know.
book, he did.
Okay.
And did you know he was married to a Sioux woman?
I didn't.
I'll show you that photo also. This is where Lee Hawk came from. Jesse, and I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but we'll get to that. They had a son. His name was Joseph Jesse. And then, of course, his Indian name, but I can't remember what it was. And this is where Lee Hawk came from. So Jesse, according to genealogy and photographic evidence, was indeed Jesse, well, he was this man's grandson that married this Sioux Indian. Jesse had a real soft spot for the Sioux Indian. He had a soft spot for the black man and Mexican people. He loved them, and he took every opportunity to help them. And there are so many affidavits attesting to this, it's unbelievable. I haven't seen a drop in the bucket as to what's out there. I have been in contact with a couple of different families who have always believed that they were descendant of Jesse James, and I would like to think that I have provided them with evidence that put the nail in the coffin on at least their rumored descendancy from him. And it's just so much fun, you know, shedding that light of something that somebody has known as a story within their family, but they've never been able to prove it.
Right.
And then you show up and you hand them the information that makes it no longer a legend. It's now a likely truth.
Have you talked to anyone and contacted them about trying to find out about information for Jesse James, and they didn't even know they were related to him?
I'm actually trying to contact two different families right now, one that has to do with Harrison Trow, another one that has to do with Tabor, but I can't remember the first name. And this is pertaining to New Mexico, another alias that he used that's not in the book.
So back to the mystery glyphs.
Yeah, mystery glyphs, that's where we were.
That's where we were. But back to the mystery glyphs.
Thank you
for
bringing me home.
Back in the, I don't know when I built my website, back in the middle 90s, I don't know, I had a website called the Treasure Hunter's Hideout.
Yep.
Anyways, I had photographs of the mystery glyphs on there, and I was contacted by an individual, Hillbilly Bob Brewer, and he told me that was KGC symbols, Knights of the Golden Circle symbols, and if I knew what was good for me, I'd take them symbols off my website. So somebody else thought that the mystery glyphs was tied to Knights of the Golden Circle, not necessarily Jesse James, but Knights of the Golden Circle.
And just to give that a little bit of credibility, you know, I met Bob Brewer a long time ago, and, you know, heck of a nice guy. When I met him, and keep in mind this is, 20 years ago, he just seemed a little bit out there. And everything to him, it seemed, was KGC. And, maybe I should have listened a little closer. Because, as it turns out, it looks like he might be right.
Really?
Two of Jesse's most trusted operatives were Sioux Indians. And I think between them and possibly a few other operatives that were not necessarily Indian, including Jesse, I think they understood and knew the glyphs. Now, you've read Tompkins, William Tompkins' book. See, Tompkins tells you in that book what he thought the hieroglyph meant based upon what the Indian told him.
Right.
And I know I've told you this a long time ago. The Indian told him what it meant in the context that that he was using it. But he never told him why it means that. See, each of those hieroglyphs, well, not all of them, some of those hieroglyphs can be broken down into what would be considered an independent symbol, and the hieroglyph itself is a combination of symbols, okay, forming the hieroglyph. In other words, he told him what it meant. He didn't tell him why it means that. And that's something I'll have to show you one of these days. But interestingly enough, the only other place these Sioux Ojibwa hieroglyphs have shown up is here in the West.
Just here in the West, yep.
You know, the Sioux weren't here, neither were the Ojibwa.
Yeah.
My ancestors came from here, but I don't know if they were related to the Ojibwa. That's the Lenape. They had their own writing system that they shoved under the rug and deemed as a fake. That's okay.
Yep,
I expect it.
They did deem that.
They did a lot of that kind of stuff.
Anything that did not fit in with manifest destiny was wrote off as a fake.
So are you saying that these two cohorts of Jesse helped him, was involved in the mystery glyphs and behind the temple, anti-temple glyphs and those things?
I think that Jesse's relationship with the Sioux Indians, and it goes deep. Not only did he marry one, and she was one of his favorites, according to Lee Hawk. She didn't mind his comings and goings. And two of his operatives being Sioux Indians, and his involvement in the Custer's Last Stand, which history, of course, isn't going to tell you, but I've even found some evidence there that
Really?
suggests that Jesse was there.
Really?
That's an interesting story. I admit it's hard to believe, but what he said, I found, it's there.
Huh?
Yeah, I think Jesse was part of that.
So who wrote the mystery glyphs then, if those people weren't here?
I think those mystery glyphs are these. Do we really want to say this on camera? I believe these mystery glyph sites are tied to these Confederate underground locations all over the West.
Why do you speculate that the majority of these are off the beaten path? I mean, they're not. I mean, like here in Manti, you can drive to them, but a lot of these are, you got to take a hike, and they're not. There's no trail to them. They're up a steep mountain. I mean, they're off the
So
beaten
would
path.
you say they were carved and designed for just anybody to find?
No, definitely not. They were not. It's definitely a message. It definitely says something, but it definitely was not made for anybody to find.
You know the railroad that used to travel through Sanpete Valley all the way down to Marysvale? And the railroad spur that used to come up from Nephi and up to Moroni and then out to Wales.
Oh, Wales. Yeah, Wales and Moroni.
You know who built those railroads?
Who?
Or who owned the company? William A. Clark. Did you know William A. Clark built the railroad down there by, out in the Tintic District, Ophir, Cedar City area? Not to mention the railroad that's 40 miles west of St. George.
Nope, I didn't know that.
And almost
And you're
every
saying
other.
he is an alias of Jesse James.
He's one of his biggest ones, William A. Clark.
Huh.
Senator William A. Clark.
Really? So, being a senator...
I don't want anybody to believe this, okay? Seriously, I don't want you to believe it.
Check you out, huh?
You either have what it takes or you don't. Go prove it to yourself.
So being a senator, though, there should be some history. Have you checked, I mean, and I know you have because you're a researcher. So you've checked the beginning of William A. Clark?
Just appeared out of nowhere.
Really? Okay.
And then in the book, he tells you where that the only information he gave the news reporter is when the news reporter come up and said, "Where are you from?" And he said, Pennsylvania. And he says, "That's all I told him. They come up with everything else."
Huh.
Next thing you know, I was born in Pennsylvania in 1839, and I had some oxens, and I made my way to Montana and found my wealth. He says, all I did was say I was from Pennsylvania. They created the rest of the story, and it's gone down in history that he's from Pennsylvania.
Huh.
And they tell this hardship story about how he traveled all the way from Pennsylvania to Montana with oxen. People are gullible. Just give them something to go on, they'll create a story. You see it every day on
Yep.
Facebook.
Yep.
So tell us about his, a little bit more about his official death in 1953.
51.
51.
His official death. Well, I think it was as early as 1946. He finally decided that I want to come out. I want to die as Jesse James. I don't want to die as Frank Dalton, Harrison Trow, or any of the other names. He wanted to die as Jesse James. I don't really think it had anything to do with look at me, pride. I think he just wanted to die Jesse James. He wanted to be himself for once. And there was a newscast, and you can actually see a very short video of J. Frank Dalton, who is likely Jesse James, on a movie, YouTube video. I thought that was pretty cool. Especially if it is in fact Jesse James. That's awesome. He actually made the camera. Jesse never drove. He, for some reason, didn't like it. Just wasn't him. But this went on for 5 years, and the majority of the people were in support of it. But a lot of critics, particularly descendants of Jesse James, they, of course said that, no, that's not Jesse. But what they don't tell you is that these descendants of Jesse James, they were descendants of Charlie Bigelow. That's why the DNA didn't match.
Well, back me up here. I know you talked about him. I got a short memory. Wait till you get my age, you'll learn that. Yes, you see what that is.
You mean next week?
Tell me, who's Charlie Bigelow again?
Charlie Bigelow.
He claimed he was...
Well, he actually was claiming to be Jesse James. Okay. See, Charlie Bigelow, and there was many that were doing the same thing. I mean, Governor Crittenden, according to the book, he was sitting there with Jesse James, and someone brought in today's newspaper, and he reads the story about Jesse James strikes again, and he said, "Hell, Jesse, that couldn't have been you. You were right here with me." And so there were quite a few wannabe groups out there that were out robbing motels and grocery stores, if you will, things that Jesse wouldn't rob. And they were claiming to be Jesse James. And one of those was Charlie Bigelow and his brothers. They were looking for notoriety. They wanted to be famous. So part of the reason why he got rid of him was because he was a snake out there posing to be Jesse James.
So back to, Jesse's moved out west here. He's got him a great life. He's hit his wealth. He's saying he's a governor. He owns the railroad, utility companies. Is he still have allegiance to the KGC? Is he still building this underground? Is he still robbing? Is he still, or is that kind of...
At this time?
Or is that kind of...
At that time?
Yeah, is that something kind of that they decide that, the South can't rise again, because of the...
It went clear up into the 20s.
Okay.
When they finally,
Just
for the most part, disbanded. They did have some reunions. And if you can find some of those reunion photos, it's interesting because if you are good at identifying faces, you can go in there and you can pick out certain individuals, like William Gregg. And I'm still not sure who he was. But I'm pretty sure he was his own entity. I just don't know that William Gregg was his actual name.
So I know that, like Bob Brewer's book, that they still had sentinels up till, and I don't know when. Up until the 20s, you're saying they still maybe had a hope that the South would rise again.
Right. But was Jesse still out doing things at that time?
Yeah, was he still out doing things? But do you think they just kind of let all this died, or you think they passed down where these caches were to help build up the South Army again? Or what do you think?
I think by the time Jesse James died, and I think everybody else that was involved, I believe that they were still under the impression that even though for the most part the organization was no longer operating, that these sites should be kept quiet and protected and perhaps would rise again at some future date when they could bring back the Free Republic.
So then do you think they left some kind of information through family members of where some of this stuff is, or?
Some, yes. I believe there's some people out there that know where some of them are.
I mean, obviously, if Jesse James became who you said, he's wealthy anyway. He doesn't need any of this for himself.
But he was still very loyal to it.
I would think there would be other people who was loyal to it that might have seen that, okay, the cause is dead and gone. Why not?
Now, I haven't gone to research this yet. Not sure why. But there is one story told in the book about someone down in Texas had found one of these supposed depositories and tried to open it and got blown all to hell. Well, that's something that you'd think you could find somewhere in the newspaper or whatever.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think I've researched that one. But eventually I probably will. And I think the way he told it in the book was that he was a relative, a son or something, from one of the previous KGC operatives. And he decided that he was going to go out and find it. His dad was dead or whatever. And he blew himself up. Because many of these sites, as he said, are booby-trapped.
Yeah.
Bob Brewer, I think he's a great guy, nice guy, well-intended. I think a lot of what he wrote about or believed may have been sensationalized. It was real to him. I think he's still alive.
Huh.
I don't believe just anything. In fact, I'm actually quite a skeptic, but
yes, you are.
I'm not a stupid skeptic. There's truth in something or there isn't.
Right.
And I just want to prove it one way or the other. And if all the evidence keeps weighing towards truth, of course that's what I'm going to lean towards until somebody can show me falsehoods. Don't tell me it's fake. Show me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can read. And as I read through the books, and this guy says this about Jesse James and gives absolutely no source for that comment, well, then to me it's speculative.
Right.
Show me the proof.
Yeah.
Don't tell me I'm wrong because this guy said it in a book. Who is he? Who am I? That's why I don't want you to believe me.
Yeah.
Prove it.
Yeah. So then you've come to the conclusion in your mind that 100% Jesse James never got killed. He lived out a ripe old age, and not only that, but he lived out here in the western states.
I won't say 100%.
You're still...
I would dare say, we'll say 99.9%. See, now I have that 0.1% fall back on. Based on the evidences that I've seen, it happened. He faked his own death, and so did several others. And you can read about it in the book. Stories about, and some people have already read some of the stories, but not from this book, such as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Billy the Kid. Maximilian, Emperor of Mexico.
Haven't heard that one.
It's in the book.
in the book you're talking about?
Yeah, go read the history
Really?
and see what happened to Maximilian. He was shot in a firing squad down in Mexico. End of story. There's nothing more to tell. Oh, but his treasure disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you want to know what happened to it, or a probable story as to what happened to it, go read the book. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people that's on their computer right now and they're in there searching out this book. Jesse James was one of his names, and you'll notice it's, $300-400.
But in your research to try and prove or disprove it, you think there's a lot of truth to it.
I'm still trying to prove it. Even though in my mind I've already done that, I'm just meticulous enough that I've got to keep going. You never know, I might hit that point where all the evidence starts weighing the opposite.
Yeah.
You know what you know.
Yep.
Is there any mention about Pancho Villa or any other?
I'm glad you asked. That's actually an interesting one, because the more I dive into it, the more I find little subtle clues and hints and whatever. But, everybody's heard of Pancho Villa. Okay, not everybody's heard of the Emperor Maximilian. But it's an interesting story. Pancho Villa. Jesse James and his operatives were a part of all that in trying to help him out.
Huh.
I can't remember the individual that they were fighting against, but they actually put him to the test and he failed big time. But you can go read today's history as to what it says happened down there and what was going on, and then you come and you read Jesse's story, and quite frankly, Jesse's story has a lot more credibility.
Huh.
Pancho Villa died happy up in New Mexico, lived out the rest of his life.
Huh.
Butch Cassidy died in Washington, state of Washington, happily ever after, married Lawrence of Arabia's daughter. And you'd think you could find something on that, but I haven't yet. So it's speculation.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell any of the story about his involvement with the Indian War against
Custer? No.
Okay.
And I can't tell you why.
Dan, tell me about you, because I know you have a great blog. I mean, you write some great articles. You put out a lot of great things. You're the webmaster, the forum. I don't know what you call it, for the Treasures of Utah forums. Tell me about what you're up to there, where people can see your work, where they can.
You don't actually read that garbage, do you?
Some of it I do, yeah.
He will post once in a while.
The writing has changed over the years. I used to write very, very tight-lipped, and the more I got involved in this and I could see the caliber of certain people whom I thought I was trying to keep the information from, I come to realize that, quite frankly, they probably couldn't find their butt if it was on fire. And so I kind of stopped worrying about it. But when it comes to details, I'm still pretty good at keeping my mouth shut and don't say too much. But I like to tell the stories, and I think the reason behind it is, and I think you would agree, Terry, I mean, honestly, I'm just not one of those people who likes to be on the pedestal. I don't like the camera. But at the same time, I love to talk about this stuff. But the biggest kick I get out of it is sharing. That's why when I do find an evidence, and I find another potential descendant of Jesse James, I gotta find him. I gotta find him so I can find out if they know.
Right.
And if they don't, and they hear the story and they accept it, great. And if they don't, oh well, I'm good with that too. I like to share, always have.
Well, and I also know you've written several books, and I know you've got several books that you haven't written that you may someday. I don't know if you will or not, but you may someday. But how do they find you on the internet? How do people find you on the internet?
Best place to find any information pertaining to what I do, whether it's the Native American petroglyphs, whether it's the ancients of this continent, whether it's the Spanish expeditions, Roman colonies, what have you, Tuscoro.com, www.tuscoro.com.
Spell that, please.
Spell Tuscoro.
I don't know how.
Take a stab.
T-U-S-C, as in tusk. Oro, as in Spanish for gold. Tuscoro. T-U-S-C-O-R-O.
.com.
www. And I think the reason why I created that site is because, I don't know, I wanted to somewhat disassociate with treasure hunting and, contrary to popular belief, I'm not a treasure hunter.
No, I remember when I first met you, you was all about the Indian petroglyphs.
Well, it's the ancient history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason that the Jesse James thing has captured me,
it's another mystery.
It's the mystery.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a mystery.
Yeah. What you're a seeker, like you said, a seeker of truth. What is the truth here?
I've always had a need to see the past. And in some cases, because of research, I can go and I can stand at a site. Like the work I did on the buckhorn wash panel. For 11 years, I just wanted to see what was actually there on the rock. And after 11 years, I finally was able to see what was there. And do I understand it any better? Absolutely not. I still have no idea what it's about.
As far as saying what was there, you brought out some, through photography, special lights, D-strips, or whatever, you brought out some highlights of petroglyphs that was not seen by the naked eye.
And for the first time, people can go and they can look at it and see with probably a 95% accuracy as to what was there. And just using modern technologies, photography, photo programs, and bringing out what was left there, but you can't see it with the naked eye.
So you told me you did a video on that?
Yeah, there's a video on YouTube.
Can I steal that from you and put it on my channel?
No.
Okay.
Of course you can.
You can find it.
I believe if you go and you type in, buckhorn wash petroglyphs, you're going to come up with tons of videos, but there's extended version. Buckhorn wash extended version, I think will get you to it. Or just go find the YouTube page, Tuscoro.
Okay.
Okay.
So you do have a YouTube channel under Tuscoro.
Yeah, I just don't use it a lot. But
so you do have some videos. If people want to see that, they can go see that.
A few, but the main reason I got it was probably for this, and then I had a few other ideas, but I take little snippets too when I want to be facetious and sarcastic. And,
okay.
Go tantalize somebody. Another individual that some people read about a long time ago here in Utah, and it was turned into a unbelievable story, was and that people do not know was involved with Jesse James, and that's Kaiser Wilhelm. And you can read about that in the book also, but
really?
I can show you without a doubt that Kaiser Wilhelm was here in Utah. I can show you several hundred acres that he purchased. Not under his name, but under his right-hand man, Baron von Horst. And I can show you the newspaper articles where the people in that day, they knew that the Kaiser was buying property. And no, he was not looking for the wealth of the Rhodes mine. The things that he were doing were so much bigger than the Rhodes mine. It's unbelievable. And no, I won't elaborate.
What do you
maybe off camera.